So have the protesters done their job? Should they go home and let the politicians sort out the country's future? Mona Eltahawy is a widely published columnist on Mideast affairs, and on this program and others, she's been a leading commentator on the crisis unfolding in Egypt and joins us now from New York. Mona, I saw you off camera shaking your head no when you were listening to that, I think, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Look, his point is the protesters can be viewed as being able to say mission accomplished, and, go home and wait until September. What do you think about that?
I absolutely disagree with that because, look what happened in the streets of Cairo today. Less than 24 hours after Hosni Mubarak delivered a speech in which he behaved like the father of the nation, ready to save it from chaos, he unleashed chaos with his thugs. I don't even call them pro-Mubarak supporters. They are Mubarak thugs. And he gave a clear message to the country. Now, can you imagine if 12 hours after the speech he does that? What will he achieve? What will he do to Egypt if we allow him to stay until September? He's absolutely not to be trusted. You can be sure that he will go after every single one of those protesters. And anybody who has stood up to him during the past 8 or 9 days, he must not be allowed to stay until September.
Isn't it fair to think that the protesters have made the point that they can, look what they had Mubarak say the other day, that he will step down, that they can back off now, and if he isn't true to his word, come back in September?
But how can we be sure that he is going to be true to his word, and why should we wait until then? Because look, every time he gives a speech the day after, he does the almost exact opposite. Who has, your caller was talking about the economy, and the economy is in shambles. Who has shut down the banks? Who has shut down the train system? Who shut down the internet and only restored it today? Who unleashed chaos on the streets of Cairo that has driven away investors and tourists in a panic? It is not the peaceful demonstrators for democracy and freedom. It is Mubarak himself. This must be placed firmly at the feet of Mubarak. Mubarak is destroying Egypt. Mubarak must go, not the democracy fighters.
Let's talk about this new element that came into the fray today, the pro-Mubarak protesters. This is the first day we've seen that. What do you know about who these people are?
Well, many people on the ground in Tahrir Square have been tweeting with pictures of identification papers that they've taken of these men that clearly link them to Mubarak's security forces and Mubarak's regime, much in the same way that we saw with looters and thugs who have been going around terrorizing ordinary Egyptians after Mubarak pulled back his security forces. Look, this is very clear. It's black and white. There's no grey area here. These have been peaceful demonstrations for democracy and freedom in Egypt. When did it become violent? When Mubarak returned his thugs on the street. Yesterday, there were more than 1 million people on the streets of Cairo, not one single incident of violence. When did the violence hit the streets of Cairo? When Mubarak's thugs hit the streets of Cairo. Who sends people on horseback and camels to beat unarmed democracy protesters? Who? Except a thug who has thugs who wants to terrorize his country into submission.
The other people on the streets, of course, that we've talked a lot about is the Egyptian military. Now, interestingly, they stood by as the pro-democracy demonstrators were doing their thing, so you're thinking, okay, they're letting that happen. But then when the pro-Mubarak people came in today, the military continued to stand by, did not defend anybody from them. I'm not sure how to read that. I wonder how you interpret that in terms of where the Egyptian military is right now, because the military, of course, as you well know, in Egypt plays such a critical role.
Well, as Egyptians, we all saluted the armed forces for not opening fire on the demonstrators, the pro-democracy demonstrators. We saluted the armed forces when the head of the armed forces came on television 2 days ago and said we will not open fire, and the pro-democracy demonstrators have legitimate points. We were very proud of the armed forces up until today. Today was a shameful moment for the Egyptian armed forces because they did not take the side of unarmed pro-democracy demonstrators. They stood by and watched Mubarak thugs beat them. So we have to wonder if there's some kind of internal struggle within the armed forces, because don't forget, Hosni Mubarak used to be head of the Air Force, and he has long worked to secure the loyalty of the armed forces by, you retire as a general in Egypt and you're given a factory to run, they're given the best apartments in Cairo, so there seems to be some kind of struggle for their loyalty. But at the end of the day, every Egyptian who was beaten and wounded, and we're talking about hundreds of people, will look back at this day as a day of shame when the armed forces had a chance to support support the civilians of Egypt, and instead they stood by as the thug president of Egypt unleashed the chaos onto the streets of Cairo.
Just very quickly, Mona, as we speak, there are flames at Tahrir Square. Do you have any hope this will end peacefully, or is it just going to escalate at this point?
Mubarak has just increased the determination of the pro-democracy supporters. There was one tweet today that incredibly moved me. A young Egyptian man who tweeted, "I have 25 stitches in my head. I can barely see from my left eye, but I'm going back to Tahrir tomorrow." The demonstrators are going to be back in force tomorrow and Friday, especially Friday. They're not going anywhere because they know this is a fight for their country. And I am confident they will win, and I salute them. I'm very proud of them.
And Mona, we will speak with you again. Thank you again for tonight.
Thank you.